Donald Trump kicked Jorge Ramos of Fusion out of a press conference. Now, he proceeded later on to let him back in, and then they had a really long debate. So I want to watch the first part here. This is when he gets kicked out.
Trump has a question about immigration. Your immigration plan.
Okay, who's next? Yeah, please. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead. No, you don't. You haven't been called. Go back to Univision. Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million.
Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1900 wall. You cannot deny citizenship to children in this
Sit down, please. You weren't called.
I'm a reporter and don't touch me, sir. Don't touch me.
Go.
You cannot touch me. I have the right to ask a question. Yes, in the order. I have the right to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, that's Jorge Ramos
Hi,
of
Jim,
Univision.
yes.
He's being escorted out of the room. He was asking a question, and Donald Trump said
No, I
he
wouldn't
didn't
do
call
that.
on him. That's why he is being removed. Jorge Ramos refused to back down.
Jorge Ramos asks before Trump gets to the panel. He says, Mr. Trump, I have a question about immigration. And then he starts to talk. And Trump, on purpose, to be defiant, he walks up to the podium and he's like, okay, I'll start taking questions now. And then he picks somebody else. And then he looks at Jorge and he's being standoffish. And he's like, no, I didn't call on you. Sit down and shut up. In other words, like, I'm going to put you in your place. Don't ask me questions. I'm going to call on you first. Now, if Trump was being, you know, a politician, actually, and being just a normal person, really, or acting like a human being, when he heard the question, I mean, this is something you got to understand, guys. This is not, like, out of line. If you see White House press conferences, people always, like, shout out questions, and then Obama will just hear one and answer. So for Jorge Ramos to just say, before he walks up to the podium, I have a question about immigration, and then start talking, that's not really breaching decorum. I know some people will act like, oh, I can't believe he did that without being called on. That's not really a good point because, again, if you know these press conferences, that happens all the time. So if Trump wanted to, we could have just answered that, and then, you know, we would have been all good. But he didn't. He decided to be standoffish, and then it escalated from there. So initially, I think Trump just should have answered that and went along and had the conversation and answered the questions. But after he didn't answer it, in all seriousness, if I was Jorge Ramos, I would have waited to then be called on in a little bit. And then if he doesn't call on you, you already have a great story. The fact that Donald Trump, the loudmouth asshole, ignored your first question, then refused to come back to you. I do think that Donald Trump, like, let's say Jorge Ramos was like, okay, I'll wait. I do think Donald Trump would have said later on, okay, now we'll talk. So initially, I blame Donald Trump because when Jorge asked the question initially, he could have just answered it. But then as it escalated, I actually think Jorge could have pumped his brakes a little bit and then came back later and asked the questions. So he was acting a little bit more, keep it real, he was acting a little bit more like an activist or a protester there than anything else. And I'm not saying activist journalism is bad. I mean, look who I am. Look at what you're watching. That's not a bad thing, and it's not even necessarily a bad thing to protest, but I think you could have got more out of it if it de-escalated right there and Jorge nipped it in the bud, and then you come back later. Now, let's move on to the next clip here. This is where Trump lets him back in. I want to say credit to him, but it's weird because it's like you kicked him out in the first place, so I don't think I'm going to give you credit for some shit that should already be the case. He should already be in there. So he gets back in there, and then they have a really long debate about immigration. Now, I can't show you the whole thing because it goes on for like 5 minutes, but let me show you a little clip of it here.
Yes. Good. Absolutely. Good. Absolutely. Good to have you back.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So here's the problem with your immigration plan. It's full of empty promises.
Okay.
You cannot deport 11 million undocumented immigrants. You cannot deny citizenship to the children in this country. You cannot build a 19...
Why do you say that?
You cannot do that.
Well, a lot of people think, no, excuse me.
You have to change the Constitution, Mr. Trump.
A lot of people, but a lot of people think that's not right, that an act of Congress can do it. Now, it's possibly going to have to be tested in courts, but a lot of people think that if you come and you're on the other side of the border, I'm not talking about Mexico, somebody on the other side of the border, a woman is getting ready to have a baby, she crosses the border for one day, has the baby, all of a sudden, for the next 80 years, hopefully longer, but for the next 80 years, we have to take care of the people. I don't think this, I don't think so. Excuse me, some of the greatest legal scholars, and I know some of the television scholars agree with you, but some of the great legal scholars agree that that's not true. That if you come across, excuse me, yeah, just 1 second. No, I am answering. If you come across for one day, and you have a baby, now the baby is going to be an American citizen. There are great legal scholars, the top, that say that's absolutely wrong. It's going to be tested. Okay?
So the question is, how are you going to build a 1,900 miles wall?
Very easy. I'm a builder. That's easy. I build buildings in a 94. Can I tell you what's more complicated? What's more complicated is building a building that's 95 stories tall. Okay? You think so, really? Well, I don't think so. A lot of people don't think so.
Almost 40% of immigrants come by plane. They simply would say their visa. So you would be
I don't believe that. Okay, you're right. I don't believe it. And the drugs come, I see them cry. They have pictures, they have everything crawling over the fences, which are, by the way, this high. I mean, you have fences that are not as tall as I am.
Well, they're coming by plane.
Oh, they're coming by many different ways. But the primary way they're coming is being right through, right past our border patrols, who, by the way, are tremendous people. And they can do the job, but they're told not to.
How are you going to deport 11 million undocumented immigrants by
Here's what we're going to do. Ready? Okay.
Are you going to bring the army?
No. Let me tell you. We're going to do it in a very humane fashion. Believe me. I have a bigger heart than you do. We're going to do it in a very humane fashion. The one thing we're going to do...
Human rights violations will be all over the place.
One question? Is there one question you want to ask? Are we going to move on?
Yeah, now, this is the part where I pretty much agree 100% with Jorge Ramos. People have said, he's filibustering, and that's not right. Well, no, he's doing what journalists are really supposed to do. Everybody else in there is kissing Donald Trump's ass or asking a tiny little question for like 3 seconds and then not doing a follow-up. Here he's trying to get into specifics. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? And don't just tell me some broad shit. I'm a builder. I build walls. Get at me. But that's not a plan. There's no specifics. There's no details. That doesn't make sense. You're talking out of your ass. You're talking out of your ferret meerkat head or whatever the fuck is up there. So here I agree with Jorge Ramos 100%, and he's doing his job, which is actual journalism, and some people are getting mad at him for that. You heard the guy say, one question, and then we'll move along here. We got to keep everything under control. You can't push Donald. He doesn't have any real details. God damn it. So Jorge Ramos says, well, you can't deport 11 million undocumented immigrants. It's basically impossible, and it would destroy the U.S. economy. And you can't deport American citizens, who are the kids of undocumented immigrants who were born here. They're American citizens. You can't deport them. He's like, well, TV scholars, which is a term I've never heard before, well, they say you're right, but I have legal scholars that say I'm right. Really? Name one. Name one. No, you know who agrees with Donald Trump? And I'm not kidding about this. This isn't hyperbole or anything. White supremacist groups. They have this talking point of like, the amendment, even though it says it applies to everybody, it really applies to just slaves who had kids here, and it doesn't mean that actual immigrants can have kids here, and then we have birthright citizenship. Not true, not true. No, it is true. It is true. What legal scholars are you talking about, Donald? Stormfront? They're not legal scholars. They're fucking racists, and they're terrorists. And then he goes on, well, how are you going to build the wall? Another great part. Classic Trump. I'm a builder. That's what I do. I build things. I manage things. I'm a builder. Thank you. I mean, this guy's fucking leading in the polls. And then another great part. Well, I'd figure this out because I have a bigger heart than you do. You're in the middle of talking about how you want to deport 11 million people. And then some. I have a bigger heart than you do. Well, you have the smallest heart known to man. You want to deport American citizens. And then another great part was Jorge's like, Donald, but you build a wall and you don't understand that more of the immigrants come in via plane. And Donald's like, I don't believe that. It's not true. Well, see, that's the thing. When you're in that right-wing bubble, somebody gives you facts and your response is just, liberal bias, not true. Well, if you dismiss every single criticism of anything you've ever said as liberal bias, and by definition it's not true, then you're never going to evolve, you're never going to change, you're never going to grow with evidence, you're never going to become more intelligent and more intellectual and learn more stuff. But that's Donald Trump in a nutshell there.